Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and transform you from a panicked plant parent into a highly systematic plant detective. If you've ever looked at a beloved garden edition and thought, oh no, what in the world is wrong with you? Well, you're definitely in the right place. Today, we're cracking the code on plant diagnostics by exploring the physiological signals our plants are sending us.
So, before you jump to conclusions and immediately reach for the fertilizer or bug spray, we really need to ask this crucial question to stop that instinct to panic. Often what we perceive as a total catastrophe is literally just the plant going through a natural cycle. The core focus of our entire diagnostic journey today boils down to one absolutely essential concept: knowing normal appearance.
Phase 1. Establish the normal baseline.
Any good forensic investigation has to start with one fundamental rule. You cannot spot a clue or an anomaly if you don't know what the scene usually looks like. The most frequent mistake we home gardeners make is misidentifying a plant's stable genetic traits or its natural seasonal behaviors as symptoms of a disease. For example, it's completely normal for conifers to shed older needles from the inside of the tree in the fall. Or maybe your bluegrass is going to seed, or you spot some natural fuzz on the underside of a leaf. Those are perfectly normal, but things like stunted new growth, dieback at the branch tips, or new needles turning yellow, now those are true red flags that require your attention.
Penn State Extension really hits the nail on the head here. You absolutely have to know what the plant is supposed to look like before you could know that something is wrong. A variegated hosta leaf or a naturally yellow-green thyme plant isn't a victim of a crime, it's just expressing its stable genetic traits. If you don't know your plant's normal appearance going in, you might spend hours and a lot of money trying to cure a perfectly healthy plant.
Phase 2. The investigative framework. All right, now that we have our baseline firmly established, we can use this systematic 6-step diagnostic protocol. This is exactly what professional horticulturalists use to eliminate variables and isolate the actual causal agents. Correctly identifying the plant, that's step 1, is absolutely key because so many pests are host-specific. Once you know the exact victim, the list of usual suspects gets substantially shorter. From there, you describe the problem with anatomical precision, check how it's distributed, figure out if it happened suddenly or gradually, collect physical evidence, and do a contextual review of recent environmental history, like, say, a sudden freeze.
Phase 3. Collecting clues. Signs versus symptoms. To actually crack the case during the evidence collection step, we've got to gather detailed clues by clearly separating the plant's physical reaction from the actual culprit. In the diagnostic world, signs and symptoms are very, very different things. A symptom, that's the plant crying for help. Things like leaf cupping, wilting, or a canker. It's the plant's response to stress. A sign, on the other hand, is the direct fingerprint left by the attacker at the scene of the crime. Think fungal spores, actual insects, or the webbing of spider mites. Let's look at some examples.
Take a really close look at this bizarre, distorted growth. This is a prime example of a symptom called fasciation. It's this strawberry plant's physical reaction to a disease known as aster yellows. The pathogen itself is totally microscopic, but the symptom, this dramatic, wild structural distortion, is incredibly obvious.
Now, contrast that with a caterpillar, happily munching away. This is a sign. It's the living suspect caught dead to rights at the scene. When you actually see the organism causing the problem, there's a whole lot less detective work required to identify the immediate threat.
But hey, even if the culprit flees the scene, they often leave physical residues that serve as definitive forensic evidence. Take this molted skin of a sawfly, for instance. Finding molted skins, egg cases, or insect frass, which, is just a polite horticultural term for bug poop, tells you exactly who broke into your garden.
Phase 4. Rounding up the suspects. With our clues collected, we can profile our perpetrators by dividing them into 2 broad categories: living organisms, which are biotic factors, and non-living environmental stressors, which are abiotic factors. Now, here is a major investigative secret. How damage spreads tells you almost everything you need to know. Abiotic, non-living damage, like frost or maybe herbicide drift, usually happens suddenly and uniformly across an area, and it doesn't spread once the event is over. But biotic, living infections, like a fungus, start small, appear scattered or clustered, and they progressively spread through a garden over time as the organism reproduces.
We gardeners love to blame bugs or fungi for everything, don't we? But often the real villain is an abiotic factor. For instance, heavy, compacted clay soil restricts root expansion and suffocates the plant. You can easily diagnose this by seeing if a screwdriver easily penetrates the top 6 inches of your soil. If it can't, your plant isn't diseased, it's just stuck in a really bad environment.
And speaking of abiotic factors, if you suspect a nutrient issue, don't just blindly dump nitrogen onto the soil. Check exactly where the yellowing occurs. Mobile nutrients can be moved by the plant to new leaves, so the older leaves turn yellow first. Immobile nutrients get locked in place, meaning the brand new growth will be the first to show deficiency, often emerging pale or distorted. Again, knowing your plant's normal appearance lets you immediately spot where the old or new growth is the part that's struggling.
Phase 5, breaking the disease triangle.
Now, when we step away from environmental stress and find we're dealing with infectious living pathogens, we really need to understand the crime triangle required for a disease to successfully take hold. Most infectious plant diseases don't just happen by chance. It requires a perfect storm: a vulnerable plant, an active pathogen, and a perfectly favorable environment, like high humidity or soggy soil, must all align at the exact same time. If just one of these is missing, the disease simply cannot fully develop.
And that is exactly how you become the hero of this story. You break just one side of the triangle. You don't always need complex chemical treatments. You can break the environment side simply by spacing your plants out to improve airflow or watering at the base rather than overhead. Or you can break the pathogen side just by sanitizing your pruning shears with rubbing alcohol between cuts. It's really that straightforward.
Phase 6, subterranean diagnostics.
A thorough detective never ever forgets to check the basement of the crime scene, the roots, because what you see above ground is often just a reflection of what's happening below. You might need to conduct a complete excavation of the root ball. Stunted, wilting leaves above ground are very often just secondary symptoms of rotting roots below ground. Healthy roots are typically firm and light-colored. If you pull gently on a root and that outer layer sloughs off like a wet sock, leaving only a tiny central thread, well, you've positively identified root rot.
The final verdict: patience over panic.
Okay, we've gathered the facts, analyzed our baseline to know what's normal, spotted the clues, and even dug into the roots. So if you've ruled out the usual suspects like underwatering or sunburn, follow these escalation steps instead of relying on random internet forums. Start by asking a local expert, like a master gardener or your local extension office. This is usually entirely free. If it's a valuable, mature tree, bring in a certified arborist. And for real head scratchers, submit a sample to a plant disease diagnostic lab.
As the Collin County Master Gardeners so wisely point out, gardening is an ongoing dialogue with your environment. You have to remember that nature is ultimately in charge, and not every single stressed plant in your yard is meant to be or needs to be saved. Sometimes the absolute best horticultural decision you can make is to learn from the loss and just plant something better suited to that specific microclimate.
So, the next time you see a wilting leaf or strange spot in your garden, what's it going to be? Will you panic and spray randomly, or will you use your new forensic skills to step back, establish your normal baseline, and let the clues naturally guide your gardening? The mystery is right there in the soil, just waiting for you to solve it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy sleuthing!